For years now, marine biologists, scientists, conservationists, NGOs, and governments have been working to protect the oceans in places all over the world. And it would make sense that projects of these types of matters would be about working together, especially with the people who live along the coastal community where these projects exist. Unfortunately, that hasn't always been the case. Coastal communities have been ignored during these projects. And luckily, there seems to be more conversations around justice and equity with environmental projects, which could lead to a better future. And I'm going to talk about this on this episode of the Speak Up for the Ocean Blue podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the Speak Up for the Ocean Blue podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Loon, and this is the podcast where you find out what's going on with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. And today we're going to be talking about speaking up for the ocean. Specifically, we're going to be talking about ocean justice and equity and how we can speak up for that. And the reason why we're doing this is because it plays a role in marine conservation. It should have always played a role in marine conservation, but really lately the conversation has sparked a lot. And last episode, if you check that out, or if you haven't checked it out, please do. That's episode 1397, where we talked about how scientists, how NGOs, and how governments can support indigenous-led conservation. And that had a lot of ocean justice and equity involved in that episode, and the need for more of that. In different examples, we talk about different examples, and we talk about a lot of indigenous groups speaking at a symposium in Puerto Rico this past year in 2022, where they talked about their own experiences, negative and positive, with marine conservation and land conservation, and the differences between the cultures and the indigenous people around the U.S. specifically, and how it all changes, and how there are some themes that are common among most of the people who spoke, and of their cultures, and of their backgrounds, and of their indigenous groups. And it got me thinking, we don't talk about justice and equity because a lot of times we don't really know what it means. When we think justice, we think, well, something's got to happen, to people. Something's got to happen, to enforce the law. Something's got to happen. People need to go to jail or pay a fine and things like that. And equity is just like, how is conservation equal to everybody? Can everybody be equal in conservation? And we're going to talk a little bit about that. One example that I always go to, because to be honest, for a while, it took me a little bit to figure out what it actually meant in terms of conservation and how people can focus on conservation. And if you think about this podcast, it's centered around the audience member, you or your colleagues or your friends who you shared the podcast with, listening to this podcast and trying to change to live for a better ocean. That's essentially what it's at. So the people who listen to this podcast, ideally, you are trying to figure out how you can live for a better ocean and how you can protect the ocean better, right? That's really what it comes down to. But not all of us are in a position where that could be a priority in our life. That could be what we're trying to do, right? Not everybody can do that because they're worried about other things. From the extreme cases, people who are in areas where they live in poverty are worried about getting their next meal and surviving, rather than protecting the ocean, right? People who live in poor neighborhoods, people live around violence in war-torn areas, they're worried about surviving to the next day. They're worried about finding their next meal. They're worried about their safety. They're not necessarily worried about the environment. I'm sure it's important to them at a certain point when all of the stuff that they're dealing with can get over that. They can get over that and they can focus on peace and they can focus on helping the environment. That's very important to them. But at this point, many people can't focus on that, because they have other things on their mind, more important things on their mind. Yes, there are more important things than protecting the environment. For me, it's a priority, right? But if my kids become sick, God forbid, that is my priority. I'm not worried about the environment so much as I'm worried about my close environment, my family, right? That's what becomes important. And so we have to look at how people around the world live, and so how they can actually, dedicate their time and their priorities, their efforts to make, the environment a priority. Not everybody can do that. And some people are having to worry about their environment, their air quality, their water quality, because they live in areas that are, just polluted. There's that one area in I believe it's Louisiana, and I think it's Louisiana. It's in the south of the U.S., where essentially I think it's called Chemical Alley, or not Chemical Alley, but Fossil Fuel Alley, something like that, where all the refineries are located in one stretch in the south of the U.S. But there are residences right by there, right? And these are minority communities, or communities that are made up of minorities. And so those minorities are having to deal with health issues related to their environment, related to the pollution from the refineries because they're so close, whether it be air pollution, water pollution, contaminants, all that kind of stuff, right? They have to deal with that on a daily basis. Their children are sick. Their parents are sick. Everybody is becoming sick in that area. So their focus is not necessarily on making a better environment for the world. Their focus is on making a better environment so they don't get sick, making a better environment so they can move, or, trying to earn more money so they can move out of that neighborhood. It's not an easy life for them, so they can't focus on protecting the whales or putting in marine protected areas. They need to focus on their neighborhoods. They need to focus on what's happening to their families, right? And so in that case, there are, cases where we're looking for environmental justice. We're looking for justice for people to live in a better environment, right? In that particular case. Other cases is where people live along coastal areas, and they could be of an indigenous background. They could be of a minority background. They can be a small village. And then a development will come in, or an industry will come in and take over that village and provide jobs, or provide, short-term returns, investments into the communities. But then they're at the helm of that mining company, of that oil and gas refinery, of the development, and they are forced to work within that area. And, their culture, their communities all have to change. Right? And they may not be able to do anything about it. Again, it's a bit of equity where they don't have a say. And then you want justice because the people are coming in and taking over their town, degrading their environment, degrading their lifestyle. And then we're looking at, from a marine protected area process, which I mentioned in the pre-intro, where people are say indigenous groups or local communities that may not have a big voice, or may not have a lot of money to have government representatives helping them out, and business leaders helping them out, right? And they're trying to be a part, like they're an ocean user, they're a coastal user, and they're trying to be a part of a bigger process, whether it be a marine protected area or feedback or public engagement for communities that are trying to protect from shipping, and making sure that the laws and the regulations that are around shipping along the coastlines aren't going to pollute or aren't going to ruin their local aquaculture, right? And so, you have these meetings, you have these workshops, you have these stakeholder groups, like ocean user groups, but some groups are left out, or some groups do not have an equal say. And that's where the equity in the whole entire process has really come to boot. There was a marine protected area process to make a marine sanctuary, or a number of marine sanctuaries along the California coast a number of years ago. I believe it was like early 2000s, maybe mid 2000s. I think it was early 2000s. Anyway, this process went through, and they were touting, hey, we've got this public engagement, we've got all this stuff. And then when it finally came out, the announcement came out, they're saying, here are our marine protected areas along the west coast of the U.S. This is great. We're really happy with this. Then groups like indigenous groups came out and said, well, we didn't have a say. We weren't at the table. We did not have a say. Well, that's interesting. And I'm sure if you go to the recent conservation diversity, was it CBD, the Convention of Biological Diversity, CBD, that COP15 meeting that just happened in Montreal, Canada. If you go to each and every country that was present and you ask them if they had an equal say to the deal that was happening, you'll probably get different answers depending on which country you ask. I've heard rumors that some of the African countries were still speaking. When the gavel was put down saying, no, agreement has been reached and we figured it out. Did every country figure it out? Did every country have an equal say? And this is where we talk about equity in these processes, where smaller countries, smaller groups, and especially indigenous-led groups, do not have an equal say in the processes. Now, we're seeing justice and equity in the ocean processes, in ocean conservation. We're seeing it talked about more. People are having conversations. They're having symposiums, and it's starting to creep into conferences in a good way. And we're starting to have these conversations. We should have been having a long time ago outside of sort of the indigenous groups and some of the NGOs that have been representing the indigenous groups or working with them for quite a long time, right? And so we're starting to see that change. We're starting to see that tide turn. And we're starting to see an influx of this kind of conversation happening, not only at conferences, but within nonprofit organizations that are part of these processes. We're starting to see it included in government processes slowly, as government works slowly. But it's starting to happen. And it makes me feel good that it's starting to happen, but I'm very cautious about it. I don't trust the process completely, because there are other people who come in, and maybe not on purpose, but there are groups like large NGOs or things like that who come in to these processes and take over. And they'll go into a village, a town that they've never been to. They don't know particularly the culture. They don't have people. Maybe they have one representative, but it doesn't have much say. And they go in and say, this is how you need to conserve. It's a little bit like we talked about parachute science. Well, this is like parachute conservation. You go into an area, you tell them this is the way the process works, and then you leave. And you say, oh, I did a good job. But then you wonder, well, hold on a second. Why isn't this marine protected area working? Well, it's because you never asked the people what they wanted. Now, there are groups out there who are doing very well and who are helping, like groups like Rare, who have had on the podcast before, who are going into fishing villages and, being invited into fishing villages and saying, hey, how can we support what you want, and finding out what they want, and supporting that, coastal community-led conservation. Sometimes it's indigenous, depending on the groups. And we're seeing more success because the people who are living in those areas, if they are championing the process, they're championing the result, they're going to make sure that result is going well. Right? It's very much like, when a business changes the brands and they have employees, they have to ask the employees how they see this company. The employees are the ones that are talking to the customers. The employees are the ones who care about the company, who brag, who bring people on to work with the company, right, or for the company. Their friends, their family, the people who they think can represent the company well. Well, if the company decides to change their brand, they should ask their employees and include the employees in the process. Now, maybe not every single conversation, but they should get their feedback. And it should feel important. It should feel like it's a necessity. It should feel like it's something that we need to do, right, as an employee to be able to move this brand forward. Because without the buy-in of the employees who are working at that company, the culture changes as the brand changes. And if the employees don't feel like they've been part of the process, they don't feel like they've had a say, they just don't have that ownership. Where if they have the ownership, they have that say, the result will be a lot better. People will be talking about it. They'll be bragging about it. They'll care about it. And that's the important part of a marine protected area process or a marine conservation process or coastal community process. The community has to buy in. The community not only has to buy in, but has to be a part of the process. It has to drive the process. Just like Hamna and Angela were saying in my last episode, they have to, lead the process. It has to be led by either the indigenous group or the coastal community that's there. They're the ones living in this situation. They're the ones who are going to be there for centuries, generations. And so we cannot talk about marine conservation. We cannot talk about all the tools like marine protected areas, fisheries quotas, marine pollution regulations, and other regulations, environmental regulations that go with it without talking about equity and justice within the community. We need to make sure that that community can hold their own, that community wants what's about to happen, leads it. You'll see better equity, you'll see better justice afterwards, right? They'll include community members, they'll include the different users within the community, and you'll get their say. And it might not be easy, it probably won't be easy, but it'll be led by the people, for the people. And that's what a true democracy is. We scientists, conservationists, people who work for NGOs and governments, we can help, we can support in the ways that are needed. And maybe we can lead in the process to take people through the process to help them more as a consultant, right? Not as a, overarching body. And I think we're starting to see that happen more and more, but it still needs to happen. We need to happen more frequently. We need to support it, but the first thing we need to do is talk about it. So when you're talking about marine conservation, talk about the people, talk about the coastal community, right? It's a great story. It's a better story than just protecting the whales. People like to hear stories of other people and how they overcome challenges. And those, when a community does a process, some sort of marine conservation project, and they succeed, they have to overcome challenges, right? The initial challenge, the challenge of running the project, the challenge of making sure that project lasts and that the results are there, and seeing it through. That's the story. And so when you talk about marine conservation, don't just talk about the animals, talk about the people around there that will go pick up plastic, that will go and make sure that fisheries are done properly, they're manage it properly, right? People will collect data. People will brag about it to other people. It becomes a sense of pride for them. When we spoke to Rare last year on the podcast, it was a big sense of pride. When the people were able to say, hey, we are, a fishing community, and it's recognized a fishing community. They had pride in what they did and how they did it and being sustainable. They could brag about it. And that's important. When you take that pride away, right, that can mean a lot. Last year I talked to fishermen. I published episodes over Oceans Week with a few fishermen in the East Coast of Canada. And you can tell when I spoke to them, you can see that they had pride in what they did. They also had pride in being sustainable. They had pride in working with, scientists, working with the government on specific projects that monitored and tracked how sustainable the lobster fishery was. That's an important part. Also, their coastal community, that's a pride. They love the towns they come from, right? They love the towns they live in. They love teaching their kids, the next generation, how to do what they do. And they want to see those kids thrive. Not in a greedy way, not in an unsustainable way, but a sustainable way and caring about the ocean. So equity and justice for the ocean, in the oceans, is about people. It really is about people. And marine conservation is the management of people. But it has to be led by those people. So I just wanted to take that time. We're going to be covering a lot more in 2023 of this type of nature. And I'm not the only one. There's another podcast called Got Science. It's by the Union for Concerned Scientists. And a lot of their content is about, policy, is about equity, is about justice, is talking to different people with sort of different approaches. And let's be honest, when we talk about equity and justice, we're talking about people talking about conservation, speaking up for the ocean, but from very different backgrounds. People from different cultures, people from different religions, people from different places around the world, speaking from their own perspective about the pride they have in their ocean, right? And being able to protect that. But we need many voices, not just from, a white male, not just from, a black woman, right? We need from everybody. We need from every different culture and from every different religion, every different background, to be able to connect to their areas, to their markets, to their target audiences. They're very, very different, right? And so when I see podcasts pop up, which I have in the last number of years, from different people, I applaud them. I love it, because we need to share the message more, right? For everybody to talk to the people that they relate to and that relate to them, because we need more of this. And I think it's, somebody asked me when I first, started podcasting, are you worried about competitors? No, it's not competitors. They're collaborators. They're people who are using a great medium like podcasting and getting out into sort of their reaches, their audiences. And yes, there will be some overlap. That's great. I want you to compare, my podcast with other podcasts and find out what you like and dislike about each one. Make us all better. Give us feedback, right? That's the best part. That makes us all better. We're all, have a science background, of some sort of communication background. We all want to get better, and we want to be able to relate to you. We want to be able to say, hey, what do you want to hear? That's what the survey is, right? That I have in the show notes. It's like, what do you want to hear? I want this podcast, the material that comes out of this podcast, I want that to be for my audience, for the audience that listens to this, for you, right? So you go to speakupforblue.com/survey and you fill out the form to find out, to tell me what you want to listen to, what you like about the podcast, what you may think could improve about the podcast. That's what I want to see. So speakupforblue.com/survey. Go check that out and fill out that survey. I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear sort of the different things. I'm rebranding the name of the podcast. I have an idea and I've dropped some hints, but I have an idea of what I want, right? So let's march into the future. Let's march in the future with more equity within the ocean, more justice within the ocean. And we're going to explore those topics because, to be honest, I'm still learning. I'm still learning what it actually means and how we can apply it to different processes and how we can apply it in the future so we can avoid the pitfalls and the challenges that we faced before, right? Not just as large conservationists going into a place and saying, this is what we need to do to conserve your area. No, it's, hey, do you need my help? No? Okay. Oh, you need my help? Okay. Where can I help? What are you guys looking for? How can I be of service? Right? That's how we need to think about it from a conservation perspective. So I'd love to hear your feedback on this. I know my message may not be as clear. And again, I'm still learning about this type of thing and how it applies to the ocean. It's not an easy concept. And I'm trying to do my best to communicate that. But I'd love to hear your perspective of what ocean justice and equity is to you and what it means to you. And if you have examples, I'd love for you to share them. You just have to DM me on Instagram at SpeakUpForBlue. I'd love to hear from you. And of course, go to speakupforblue.com/survey to fill out the survey to find out what you like and what you'd like to see on this podcast in 2023. So I want to thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Speak Up for the Ocean Blue podcast. I'm your host, Angelou, and have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.